How I Came to Like the Woman in the Picture. Part 2. The Elizabeth McGovern Connection. Back in the summer of 2001, I was 26 years old and homeless. My pattern at that time had been to travel around the country in search of work. Meanwhile, I slept in my car. This was not by choice, but of necessity. Understand that I was no wayfaring free spirit, and neither was I a bum. Rather, I had, and still do have, a debilitating nerve illness known as POTS. And because of this illness, I have struggled over the years to keep full-time jobs. Instead of collecting disability checks, which I qualified for, I instead tried to tough it out by making ends meet, working here and there at day jobs, and sleeping in my car and at cheap motels. It was a tough life, but I did get by those few years. It was anyhow one particular night this summer of 2001 that I was trying to sleep there in the backseat of my '89 Honda Civic when all of a sudden I had this lightning bolt of inspiration come to me. The thought was that there was something significant, very significant, about actress Elizabeth McGovern. Who? Oh, I remember her. I hadn't thought about Elizabeth McGovern in years, since way back in school days. It was not an actual thought, just a sense, and it was completely out of the blue. Such was the force of the sense even that, 10 minutes afterward, I would go to the nearest phone booth and share with a relative in regards. I asked this relative to pray for me. The feeling would grow stronger. Something about Elizabeth McGovern. Something. I had time to spare, and so I decided to rent every single one of Elizabeth McGovern's movies as to find out what might be so significant about this one actress. I rented a VCR, a room at the Roach Motel, and then every single one of her movies. However, nothing stood out. Note, the coincidence would have to be 1 in 1,000, or at least 100, for it to classify as from the Holy Spirit. Also, there would have to be a conviction of conscience. Also, the message would have to make some kind of protracted sense. Now, the movie I ended up liking best was Racing with the Moon. The Holy Spirit, however, relayed no significance to me in regards to this one movie. Another Elizabeth McGovern movie I ended up liking was called Wings of Courage. This movie was about a pilot who crashes and is stranded in the wilderness, in the Andes Mountains, in fact, in South America. Meanwhile, his wife waits patiently, believingly, and courageously for his return. This pilot has in his possession a picture of his wife. It is this picture which gives him the hope and the courage to make it through his ordeal in the wilderness. Now, this deal with the picture really at the time struck me, although I was not exactly sure why. The final movie I ended up watching was called Ragtime. I did not like this movie. Elizabeth McGovern had only a bit part in it. She was too young, too skinny, too red-headed, and the character she played in the movie was actually quite annoying. Had you by chance asked me whom this character in this movie she had played was, I at the time would not have been able to tell you. I did not recall a name being mentioned, and also by the time I had gotten around to watching this movie, I was so very sick of Elizabeth McGovern movies that I was hardly paying attention anyway. The character she had played, I was to find out years later, was turn-of-the-century icon Evelyn Nesbit. I began to wonder, meanwhile, that summer of 2001, as to why the Holy Spirit would have me waste literal weeks of my time watching boring old movies about some 80s actress. Actually, not all of her movies were boring. This one here was, for example, quite good. Still not satisfied, though, with these movies that I had watched in the face of so strong a leading, I one day decided to take a trip to the local library and go on the internet. I wished to see if there was maybe some movie that I had missed, or a TV show or something or other. Bingo! I found one. Elizabeth McGovern had once played a role in the TV series Tales from the Crypt. Oh, great. An HBO special. Probably a one-time airing. Fat chance I'd ever be able to watch that one. Anyway, so then it was I left the library. I went to go have lunch at a Japanese fast food type restaurant. Later on that evening, I began to feel really sick. Not wanting to pay $40 whole for a motel room, though, I decided at any event that I would have to. I felt like I was about to throw up. So I checked into the hotel around like 7 p.m. and just lay there for a while. Rest in an actual bed did me good. I began to feel better. It was then around 9 o'clock that I turned the television on. Not familiar with the local stations, I flipped to the channel guide to see what was on. It was kind of funny because I noticed the words Tales from the Crypt on one of the stations which I believe had been the Sci-Fi channel. And right then and there at 9 o'clock. Now, Tales from the Crypt was an old HBO series that had ended in like 1997. But this was 2001. I was rather surprised. So I flipped the channel. Now, had I flipped but 5 seconds afterwards, I would have missed the opening credits and probably not have watched the program at all. Of course, Tales from the Crypt is not the kind of program I would otherwise want to sit down and watch. Here then is what I saw moments after flipping that station.
It's a nasty bit of stereodynamics I call horror in the night.
Whoa! It was the very episode which Elizabeth McGovern had starred in. What were the chances of that? I was blown away. This episode, by the way, may be viewed on YouTube. I sat down and watched. Elizabeth McGovern did not play an actual person in this episode, but rather a kind of ghost.
Back from the dead, huh?
Her character, see, lives in this old hotel, which is really not a hotel at all, but hell, as it were, raised up. The ghost/woman abides in this hell hotel for years, decades even, all alone. She wants out. She wants a drink. More than anything else, though, she would like a friend. This episode ended up making quite the impression upon me. All things considered, the coincidence here was maybe like 1 in 100,000. Granted, I did not know what it meant exactly at the time. Now, this Tales from the Crypt episode would escape my memory entirely until I was to be reminded of it again in the summer of 2011. And at which time, I would come to compare the woman in the episode who had been the ghost to the mystery woman of my dreams. More to the point, in regards to a certain mansion in Pennsylvania where it is claimed that the ghost of the mystery woman of my dreams, to this very day, yet abides, all alone. Note: the more I study into the life and career of Elizabeth McGovern, the more striking connections I see between Elizabeth McGovern and the woman who would turn out to be the mystery woman of my dreams. For example, I recently discovered that Miss McGovern had once voiced an audio recording of Henry James's